Phails at philosophy. What the heck could it be? Life such a mystery. Phails.
Welcome to Phails. My name is Philip Jones, and we have back again Grant Potts. We're just all going to wave at all the cameras. Grant Potts in the house for our fourth installment of the big questions of philosophy, the comparative look from Western philosophy and Buddhism. My fifth interview with Grant Potts. We're starting to get the hang of it, huh?
Yeah.
We got some tea. Ashwagandha tea. We're not exactly sure what ashwagandha does. Y'all put it in the comments or call Grant and tell him.
Yeah, I think you said it might be mellowing.
Might chill us out.
Which is not what I need right now.
You need uppity ups?
I mean, I don't know. I think I just need more sleep. Maybe a couple extra days on the weekend.
More extra days on the weekend.
Yeah. I was up late last night.
You were?
Yeah. Checking on the fire. We had a fire going out back.
Nice.
Yeah, it was a beautiful night.
It was a beautiful night. So, I didn't read this chapter, Grant.
I thought you were going to say that. You just had this look of like, and then you're like, how can I spin this? This would be a great opportunity to just say, let's see what happens when I don't read the chapter.
Well, no, I've thought about this for a while.
Okay.
Like how to spin this, as you say. I took a couple running starts of this chapter.
It's a tough chapter.
And I actually watched videos, David Chalmers speak, his TED Talk.
Right.
About consciousness and the hard problem.
Yeah.
Right? What he says is a hard problem. I took running starts at it, and I didn't get deep enough into it where I want to... We can talk about it a little bit, but I'd like to do maybe a recap on the first three chapters and maybe talk about philosophy, where we've gotten like a midway kind of check-in and talk maybe a little bit about it. How do you feel about that?
Well, I want to hear what your experience of digging into the videos like. It was like a start and then a stop. Was it just hard to get through? Was it hard to get your head around? Was it hard to care? Like what was the experience there?
Hard to know, right? There's a lot of life stuff that's been going on for me.
Okay.
But I did take authentic runs at the literature.
Right.
Where I'm going to read this. And traditionally what I've done with these chapters is I've read them as quickly as possible the first time and not taken any notes. Mm-hmm. I've just read it. And then the second time I go through, I read it and take detailed notes. Mm-hmm. And then the third time I read it, I kind of, it's some version of the two. Like, do I match up the notes with what I read? Did I miss anything? Where am I at? This time I couldn't get through the quick read. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if that's because of the material or because of what's going on in my life or...
So one thing I'll say that I think hit me reading this, and it was really on my first read, and I think if I can...
Let's dial the listeners or the audience into this. This is the Philosophy's Big Questions. What's the subtitle?
Comparing Buddhist and Western Approaches.
And the author is?
The editor is Stephen Emmanuel, and then we were going to talk today about can consciousness be explained?
Can consciousness be explained? We're going to talk about it a little bit, but not. I want to have a full episode on it when I've gotten to.
So you want to come back to this?
I do want to come back to it.
Yeah. So, I don't even want to read this sentence because it's difficult to process the sentences in this chapter.
You felt that way too.
Absolutely. And I don't want to just get on camera and totally aggressively attack Dan Arnold because I think he's actually using a conceptually sophisticated, way of presenting his ideas that once I got my head around how he was putting words together into sentences, I could process, but it took me, when I started reading this, I found myself sentence by sentence backing up and going, what did he just say in that sentence?
Yeah.
And it wasn't necessarily the conceptual aspects of it, although there is, it's really the way he puts words on top of each other. And there were moments where the structure of the sentence seemed to be constructing, say, a complete clause, but it sounded like it was just a phrase, and I couldn't figure out where the subject of the sentence was. And yeah, if I were an editor, I would rewrite a little more.
I'm relieved.
Yeah.
'Cause- yeah.
Yeah, no, and so I think his writing style is a little more obtuse than it needs to be, and that makes it difficult. I think understanding what the hard problem of consciousness is, on one level, it seems really simple. On another level, its simplicity makes it harder to get your head around. So that's conceptually difficult. And then he's working with what I find to be three of the more interesting Buddhist philosophers.
Dharmakirti,
Vasubandhu, and how do you say
Dinaga.
Dinaga.
Which it seems like Dinaga and Dharmakirti are together.
Yeah, Dharmakirti is a commentator on Dinaga.
Okay.
And then Vasubandhu precedes both of those.
And I couldn't find a lot of great videos, a lot of content on YouTube.
There is, yeah, because there's some of the Buddhist philosophers that Western philosophers like the most, because they are so conceptually intricate, because they're making very complex deductive arguments, but they're not ones that you see a lot of popularity around in terms of popular Buddhism in the United States. Right? You know,
Like with Nagarjuna,
right? Yeah,
I found a ton of stuff on Nagarjuna,
Right.
and I could really get into it. He is maybe one of the forefathers of Mahayana Buddhism, so it makes sense. We've got this kind of leader
right.
of Mahayana. I don't know where Dharmakirti and Dinaga fall in,
They're a bit later. Like if you look at their dates,
but they're still Mahayana.
yeah, they are. They're like 5th, 6th, 7th century of the Common Era. So they're coming into the game. You know, I guess what would that be parallel to the middle of the Byzantine Empire? That kind of
What's
time.
Byzantine? Who's that?
That's the Roman Empire in the East after
Okay.
The Roman Empire collapses. So like the late Roman Empire, early Dark Ages, kind of. That's about the period we're looking at. But they're tough too, right? So there's these layers of toughness, right?
The author seems to approach
writer
us in
is a
an
bit of-
obtuse way.
Yeah.
The people he's covering tend to be
Right. And-
more difficult, a more thick subject matter, or the way they're talking
and the
about
way
it.
and some of the arguments that, like Vasubandhu's argument about our experience of the world turns on this discussion of what happens to us when we're in the hell realms.
I didn't get there.
What we're actually experiencing, which itself is just a weird thing to try to get your head around. Because I think when my students encounter that, because I do read Vasubandhu with my students, they're just like, some Buddhist religious nut talking about hell realms. Like they just see hell
What
realms,
is it?
and they don't understand.
We haven't gotten to that
conceptually, like why it actually matters, and so
we haven't gotten, or I haven't really learned a lot about in Buddhism. There's realms,
right.
which I haven't gotten to yet. I kind of feel like I might be low key in Scientology, and I haven't learned about.
You haven't
Lord.
learned about the operational Phaetons and the 747.
Yeah, and it's like Buddhism's about to turn on a dime when I'm getting the 10,000th hour. 10,000th hour, it's like, and then the aliens came and
Right.
these realms. I'm
Anyway,
kidding,
so
but
yeah, so that's that. So no, definitely
We're gonna give me another
understand.
2 weeks to talk about that.
sure. So what do you want to talk about?
Well, what I want to talk about, I want to talk about Dan Chalmer, because I did learn something about that, which is kind of like the Western side of it, which it kind of hinted at and then moved on.
Yeah. He sets up the problem that Chalmers sets up. It's rooted in
And now we're going to talk about Buddhism.
Right. And I mean, he basically says, hey, there's this problem, and Western philosophers look at it this way. And part of what he's saying is they often are talking about Buddhist philosophy, but they're in a very different understanding of fundamentals than Buddhist philosophers, because like most of the people he claims who are worrying about this problem with consciousness are naturalists or physicalists.
Right. The brain.
Right.
They think about the brain.
They think about the physical brain, and then what is the problem for explaining consciousness within the context of that. And he says, what's interesting, and what he's trying to say is interesting here, is that when you look at the idealistic tradition, this tradition in Buddhism, which is a very strong tradition, is in some ways pervasive of Buddhism, that everything is mind, right? That what is fundamentally real is consciousness.
Mm-hmm.
They hit the same kinds of problems in explaining consciousness that the physicalists in contemporary Western philosophy hit. And that these same problems are, and part of what he ends up arguing in the chapter is that this problem is much more fundamental than we even realize from the Western perspective, because it hits at root issues of explanation itself. Sort of how do you explain yourself? The shift between explanatory work really being a kind of third person, this happened over there. How do you explain first person experience from a third person perspective?
Yeah. When I watched the video on
Chalmers?
Chalmers' TED Talk, well, no, I watched that, and then I watched an interview with him and Lex Friedman.
Mm-hmm.
And Lex asked him, what would it be easier to map, the universe or the mind? And I thought, obviously, like, you have to map the mind on the way to map the universe, which is what Chalmers said. Like, if you can't map the universe without mapping the mind, because it is a part of that whole.
Right.
But then I thought, what if the mind is the universe?
Mm-hmm.
What if that's it? Like, you can't have a universe without a mind. So when you map the mind, you map the universe.
Mm-hmm.
Because without the mind, there is no universe. Like, once I die, the universe is gone. We have these small snapshots of whatever this is that might exist after we're gone.
Mm-hmm.
I imagine it does. Everything doesn't go away. My grandpa's dead. I'm still here.
Yeah, I mean, I think that we can't invalidate the notion that when we die, everything goes away, right?
We can't invalidate it.
Yeah, like that kind of, what is a kind of almost like solipsistic view. Like, everything is about my mind, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm experiencing this world, and when I go, it's all gone. Like, and there's no way to make an argument that says that's definitely not the case, right? So we have to fall back more on kind of what's the more reasonable explanation. It's similar to this basic problem in the philosophy of mind of the problem of other minds. How do I know you have a mind?
Right.
Even if I accept that I have consciousness, how do I know that you have consciousness, right? Well, the way I know that you have consciousness is that you seem like, again, this is that first person, second person dilemma, because the only evidence I have for consciousness directly is my own experience of consciousness. I never experience anyone else's state of consciousness.
I can't dip into your consciousness.
Right, I can't dip into your consciousness and say, oh yeah, that... Like,
and I create you like I create myself.
Right. And so there's all sorts of possibilities. Like, you have consciousness and it's very much like mine.
Which is how I do it.
Right. You have consciousness, but maybe your state of consciousness is completely different. And I think we get into that, like, you begin to see that when people imagine, well, maybe all humans have consciousness, but would consciousness of some alien species be fundamentally different? And so like narratives like Arrival, or I'm watching Three Body Problem right now on Net, which is really good on Netflix. And
I saw that.
It's playing with that as well. Like, this sort of misunderstanding that this alien species has of how humans work, right? That on a fundamental level, that experience of consciousness would be different. We could say that's probably true person to person. I have no fundamental evidence that the way you experience consciousness is anyway like mine, except through this kind of validation we get through language, right? You can describe what you're experiencing. I can take that and say, oh, that sounds like what I'm experiencing, but it's always mediated through our concepts and language, right?
Well, hold on. Would it be when Chalmers talks about consciousness, he, if I understood it correctly, he was saying you could even apply that to AI models, because for him, consciousness unfolds or is through data structures and the relationship of interpreting data. Once you have like the software, once you have that, once you have interpreting sensory input, some structure of analysis and discernment begins, and then that is where consciousness is revealed. If I understood it correctly, and I might not have, but the where it brings that here as we're discussing this is, how do I know that we all have the same version of sensory equipment? How do I know that your hearing is like my hearing, your eyesight is like my eyesight, and so on and so forth? And if someone has V0 hearing and you folks that are blind have amazing hearing or smell, or folks that can't hear have amazing, there's these other. What if there was someone out there that just had the extremes on all of the level of sensory input? Wouldn't their level of consciousness be different because the way they're interacting with data and the fidelity of the data they're receiving is so much different?
Yeah, I mean that's part of. I think that's a good thing to contemplate, right? Because the classic example that they refer to here, I know Chalmers refers to, goes to this essay from the 70s by a philosopher, Thomas Nagel, called, I think, What Is It Like to Be a Bat? Where he puts forth this notion of consciousness as the state of being like something, right? Like to be conscious. To be conscious as Philip is to be what it is like to be Philip, right? Right? And so you kind of inhabit this space of being that thing and operating the world as that thing. When we think about how a bat experiences the world, right, through sonar,
Right.
we can't access that.
We don't have that equipment.
Right.
We've got no understanding of that. We can look in we can go in a submarine, right? And we could look at a screen that has sonar.
Right. We can create visual analogies.
We can't make that internal.
We can try to even think about what it would be like to close our, but we don't have sonar, right? We don't have this.
We don't have it.
Right. So we just don't have that experience. We don't have that experience that a snake has where its primary sensory input is taste.
Taste.
Right. And so those, I think, present challenges to a notion that there's some sort of monolithic experience of consciousness that we can access easily. And I think those more extreme examples of distance in experience then come back to sort of these puzzles between human beings. Like, what is it the same kind of, is being Philip the same as being Grant, right?
Yeah.
On this basic level. I think probably, right? I think you probably have a state of consciousness. It seems the most reasonable explanation, right? It seems most reasonable that the universe will go on after you die.
And yet you're saying that to yourself now.
Right. I'm saying that to me. I'm saying that to you.
But I'm not here. I mean, I'm here, but...
You are here. It's most reasonable for me to believe that you're here.
I'm here.
Yeah.
I know I'm here.
Right. And
vice versa.
So we can come up with these kinds of interesting conceptual schemes that help us think through problems. But that doesn't mean they're the most reasonable explanation for what's going on. They're not the best explanation for what's going on. And I think keeping that distinction is important, right? Like these kind of thought experiments that we can develop that show us the extremes of the problem we're wrestling with don't necessarily provide an argument that that's the best way to describe things. They at best present an argument that this is a possibility that's real as a possibility, and what you know is not absolute.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean what you know isn't more reasonably the thing. Like it's much more reasonable to believe, given an experience of the world where I see people die, people who seem to have awareness like I have awareness, and when they die, the universe goes on because I am here and keeping going on.
Yeah.
Happens all the time. That when I die, that's probably going to be what's
Right.
going to happen. Do I know that 100% with absolute certainty?
No.
No.
So, with this time together, one thing I thought, I want to do an episode that is, you reminded me of this when you said, how do you know Philip? What it's like to be Philip in the world. I thought about doing an episode, Phil Fails at Philip, where I interview myself, what's it like to fail at Philip? Or what's it like to succeed at Philip? And why are you doing this? What's important to you? And have a whole conversation with myself about myself, and then do a whole history like I do with folks. I haven't figured out exactly how to do it yet, but I'd like to.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing because even the staging of it, you asking the questions and running over to the other one.
It'd be very gestalt, right?
Right, there's just a level at which you wouldn't capture the, I love interviews partly as a medium because they're not scripted, because there's a natural flow back and forth between people. Getting that with yourself is, I don't know how you'd stage that.
That is where I'm at.
And on a certain level, it's just always going to be a contrivance. There's no getting around it.
I might just have
there's
to
only one you.
deal with the imperfection of it all,
Right.
and just do a 10-minute test run of it, and just see what it's like. But I've been toying with it. Here's what I think with this time together, and then I want you to tell me what you think, things that you might want to do. We got an hour and a half or so. I thought retrospective of this outside of philosophy. What's it like for a more personal, like Grant and Philip? How is this relationally, from a interpersonal perspective? And then I thought a 3-chapter kind of synopsis wrap up, how do we feel about these 3 chapters? How are we changed having sat with them for a while? Those are 2 things I'll put out. What do you got?
Sure. Sounds good.
Do you have any?
No, I was coming here to talk about the chapters, so we're putting that aside till later, so it's your show now.
Well, I mean, it's our show.
No, I know.
We're co-creating this.
Yeah, but no, I'm still dealing with that groggy brain, so.
So you're willing to let me drive?
Yeah, I mean, I'll probably steal the wheel from you at some time. Don't worry.
All right. We'll start with the retrospective. I'll keep a little bit of an idea of time so we can do both of these things. And I'm going to approach it like I learned how to do retrospectives in software. And maybe you learned how to do it. It's like Agile kind of.
Yeah, what do you mean by a retrospective? Unpack this for me.
Good question. I don't have a dictionary on me, but I think retrospective is looking back on something and considering the impact of it, considering what happened.
Okay, cool.
Talking through what happened.
Cool.
And I'll start it with a start, stop, and continue.
Okay.
Start, stop, and continue. And this is kind of what do we want to start doing in episodes moving forward?
So this is a retrospective on the discussions of the chapters.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
It's a retrospective.
So it's yeah.
And then the second part will be relational.
Right. Okay, cool.
Where you just kind of talk about, how does this feel? Do you feel good, comfortable in here? Blah, blah, blah. The retrospective. Start, stop, and continue.
Okay.
So we'll start with start.
Okay.
What do you think are things, you got groggy brain, but
Yeah, it's fine.
just pull through it. What do you think are things we could start doing in these episodes that would help you engage more, be more active, or...
Are you saying I'm not engaged?
No. Man, I had this whole feeling. I knew if I talked to you about that, I was trying to get the Buddhist on here, you'd be like, what about me? Am I not a good enough Buddhist for you? We're not even a Buddhist, dude. And you'd be like, you're awesome. I'm awesome. It's a question for both of us.
Right.
What could we do to either bring more participation or engagement, or make it more exciting for the viewer, or make it more, more entertaining?
Yeah, I'm struggling on that one because I'm actually really enjoying the conversations a lot. There's not a lot I'm necessarily feeling a desire to shift in terms of starting new things. I never found myself walking away and being, I think we should do this because that will make it much better for the audience, etc.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's. I'm. What do you have any ideas on what you'd want to start that would be?
Now, I'll share this. I don't have a list. I'm starting right now as an improviser.
Right.
And if you ask me to improvise, I can improvise.
Great. So improvise. What do you got?
So the things that come to mind immediately are, I wonder if we could have some kind of like episode gimmicks. Like when I do my interviews with folks, we have the clap, which is a kind of a carryover from Phil Phails' interviews. I do the clap, I do the 5 questions, I do the improv game, and then I do this whole thing where I talk about their life story, and then I do landing the plane at the end. Those are kind of my 5 Phil Phails gimmicks.
Right.
And I thought, like, what could Phil Phails at philosophy gimmicks be?
Well, what is the value of those gimmicks? I'm intrigued. What do they bring to the experience for you, or for what you perceive for the audience, or
Yeah. They make it easy for me to cut up subsections for presentation. Now that I'm looking, I haven't released anything yet, but I'm at the precipice of it. I'm about to start releasing stuff. And as I look at all these, I'm like, how do I cut these up into bite-sized, like less than 2-hour chunks?
Right. No, absolutely.
And so, and then how do I show people continuity and consistency through?
Right.
So they say, oh, you know how when I go to the newspaper, when I went to Austin Chronicle, I used to go, and you know what? I would only read the, what was it? Where they'd ask a question, and someone would answer a question like, Dear Abby. I forget what it's called. But you would go there
Those
for
advice
that.
columns?
I would go there for that because I thought it was funny, or I would go there for a particular comic strip.
Right.
Or I'd go there for this. I don't have to love the whole paper.
Right.
I could find joy and pleasure in one of the aspects of it. And so I think, well, maybe people will like the improv games, or maybe people like the Phil Fives questions, or maybe they'll like some of the opening banter.
Yeah, and it gives you an ability also to potentially even do a reel that is like the improv games as one episode or something.
Yeah.
And show people kind of the relationship between these people you've interviewed in a different way than when they're just watching it the straight way through, because they see this particular segment side by side.
Absolutely.
So it gives you segmentation.
Segmentation.
Anything else it gives you?
Good question. Maybe ways we could, I'm brainstorming here too, ways we could apply the question or whatever the topic is to the same route.
You know
what I mean? Like,
yeah.
take this question on this route.
Yeah, that's actually one of the, that's, now that this is why it's good to talk, right? Now that you're talking, I realize, what I was thinking about the other day in relationship to these conversations is we've got these questions and we've got the text. And a lot of our interview has been kind of working through the text.
Yeah.
Which I think is vital, right? Partly as an educator who thinks that people don't really often have the experience of knowing what it is to work through difficult texts.
That was the premise of this was your interview where you said you want to learn philosophy,
right.
You need to read.
Right. And part of that is about reading the philosophy, but part of that is about the experience of the difficulty and the rigor of reading a difficult text and working out what it's actually saying to you.
Making something that's unknown and foreign and confusing, less unknown, less confusing.
Right. And doing it, not just I'm going to read this and make a story about it, which I think with like narrative literature is more, like there's a much wider range of interpretations, but where you're reading something, there's an argument being made and you're either getting it or you're not.
Right.
Right? So how do you how do you work through that? I think that's been valuable. But one thing we talked about that we haven't done as much, and maybe we just need to segment it more, like create a more kind of like, we'll start off with this and then this, is what about this question, right? We've done a little bit about that, but like just throwing the text aside, can we explain consciousness, right?
Just like us,
us
waxing philosophic,
like working through it, because I think that was part of why we chose this book, was because it had these questions, and it could give us an ability to talk about the text, but also just to talk.
Then let us be philosophers,
right? Yeah, exactly.
Let us philosophize.
Exactly.
We've been exposed to this now. How do we feel? How do we think? How do we interpret this? And then expound.
Yeah, like when you were like, what? Maybe when I cease to be a consciousness, it all ceases because it's all held in mind.
Yeah.
I mean, that is, if you think about these arguments like Vasubandhu's or Bishop Berkeley in the Western tradition, who are idealists, who hold that and these, both of them basically have the same radical position, which is the only thing that exists is mind.
Right.
Right.
And which is the position I was taking.
Right. But then if we associate mind with ourselves and our first person experience, then that does bring up that. For Berkeley, that's like, it's all mind that exists in the mind of God, right? So God is what allows, is partly his warrant for the existence of God, the existence of a universe in which other minds and there's continuity, etc. So yeah, like that's an interesting question to explore. And we won't get at that sort of by just staying in the text.
Right.
Yeah.
We got to break free from the text and have our own discussion. Right. Maybe I'm going to put down here, let's do that with the second half of this about the first 3 chapters.
Yeah, maybe. And maybe
we'll see.
Maybe for the
But
gimmick,
we can segment it from moving
the
forward.
book and throw it at one of the cameras.
Yeah,
No.
for the gimmick. At this part in the show, we're throwing away the text. The
like
camera
destroy
falls
the
over. Sorry, guys, about this destroyed camera. I like this. So what you're saying is start breaking free from the text and having a discussion about what it means to us.
Yeah, like maybe we're like, we're about the hour. It's time to throw out the text.
Yeah, I like that. Throw out the text gimmick. Throw out the text. Once we've satisfied to both of our for both of us, that we understand the question and understand some of the arguments for either side, we say, where do we land? And then hash it out. I like that. Dude, that's a good start.
Yeah, it's a good start.
We'll do that. We'll set that up for the next time. How much time do you think we need for it? 30 minutes or so?
I mean, I'd say we do that about halfway through.
Halfway through?
Yeah.
Okay. We're going to have to rush through the text more.
Yeah, but we're getting better at it.
We're getting better at it.
Yeah.
But it's also getting harder. Does it continue to get harder? Is this like a video game?
I'm reading this text for the first game.
Oh my God. You said that for the first game. Because I was thinking like, are there harder bosses?
Right. No, because I think like the most difficult chapter before this one was the first chapter.
Yeah, how to live a good human life.
Right. And again, it was...
Which I thought wasn't that hard because the way they broke it down...
Yeah, but it was just like... It was a little harder to get into because of his... And it was, again, stylistic.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I think there's an interesting thing here about style of writing. This is why I do prioritize a very direct, clean style in my writing, and when I teach my students to write, is just like, don't make things harder for your audience than it needs to be.
Do you have some writing that we should tell these people to go find and read?
I mean, I have writing, but I don't know if they need to go find and read it.
Okay, well,
its age is old. So.
We could tell them. Yeah. Okay.
Maybe someday.
Okay. I think I saw like an older post that came up in the Facebooks that said you like had a tie on and you had a young alchemy.
Oh, that just came. That was a paper I gave in at Rice University. All of that stuff, which was this ethnography I did, is I've done in papers at conferences, but I've never gotten that into a published form yet.
Okay, start we've got to start. I think we go into stop. So what do you think we should stop doing in these, apart from like only staying in the text, which kind of comes out of our start?
Yeah, but obviously.
What do you think? There's something we could stop doing that's maybe not helping us or not, or impacting the flow, or
Not that I can think of.
Well, think of something.
Yeah, it's like you're making me look for deficits where there may not be one. It's deficit-minded thinking, man.
Um,
You could stop with the random phrases.
the deficit-minded thinking phrase.
Just like,
Do I have any stops?
yeah, I can't think if I have any stops for me or for you or for the setup.
I haven't
like
edited I haven't edited any of these.
Yeah.
I think when I start editing them all, I might
be like-
have some more.
Stop saying so much.
I mean, I probably do.
Exactly.
I've learned that about myself.
No, but seriously, I can't think of anything that I think we need to cease doing that wouldn't be mostly about maybe doing that less to make room for other things we could
Right.
do. And that's been kind of my, again, partly because my experience has been good.
Yeah.
So
You're having a good experience.
I'm having a good experience.
And that's good. Okay, we'll move past deficit thinking and towards continue. If you think about kind of roses and thorns,
Right.
those are the thorns. And I think if we wanted to do like a John Gottman approach, he says that the bank account for a relationship, for it to be sustainable, nurturing and positive and healthy, needs to be 5-1. 5 roses to every thorn. Well, he doesn't talk about it in Roses and Thorns. I think he talks about it in your response to bids for connection.
Okay. Yeah.
But I'm just like putting in this other framework.
It's interesting that he quantified it at that level.
5-1.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think
Continue.
it's good. It's good to think about what to continue, because it's like, what are we doing that seems positive for us or for potential viewers that we want to lean into, right? We want to lean into that aspect. That is the opposite of deficit thinking. It's asset thinking.
Yeah, asset thinking.
Which is, what's the good? I mean, I like when we're getting on an idea and we're going back and forth. I don't know. I think partly what I'd like to continue are those moments where we're both excited about it, but what's leading us is not my idea about it or your idea about it, but the thing itself we're trying to get to. I don't know how to really compartmentalize that in what we do in our own behaviors, except to be attentive to that and be like, hey, that's an interesting thing to chase. Let's chase that idea and see where it goes.
Yeah.
Not because I'm excited about a particular place we might land, or you're excited about a particular place we might land if we follow that, but just where that idea will take us.
Where it goes.
Yeah. So that openness in conversation, I think, is something we should definitely continue.
Yeah. Excitement about the subject matter.
Right.
Open-mindedness and exploration of like where it leads us without any expectations or efforting towards something, but just out there.
Yeah, because at our best, what we're doing is engaging in inquiry, right?
Yep.
And inquiry is really that. It's about asking the question and seeking. I don't even want to say an answer, because an answer seems to like foreclose on the question, make it go away. I mean, maybe the answer, but seeking the way that question is addressed, maybe is a better way. Because that's sort of more open-ended. It's not like you get the answer and then you're done. But where you are seeking something outside what you know, right? And so
you're seeking to expand the knownness of the world within yourself.
And so that requires you to be in a stance where you're accepting
new information,
new ideas, new perspectives, new ways of of looking at the world, new ways of experiencing the world, new ways of experiencing yourself.
Yeah.
Right. To me, that's really valuable. Right. And in professional philosophy and academic philosophy, I think that's the heart of it. But it's often what's de-emphasized because so much focuses on validation. Right. Once I get that answer, once I get that idea.
Can I be proficient as a writer and then get people to validate?
Well, no, not that kind of but I mean,
what kind of validation?
Like mathematical validation.
Oh, okay.
Like, is this right?
Prove it.
Right. Yeah. Did I, and that's an important part of inquiry because when you're engaging in inquiry, you're not engaging in just a creative act of making things up. You're asking a question and seeking the truth, right? So that validation part is an important part of it. I think it's the easiest to structure. Like, I think it's actually the easier part of it is to start doing the analytic work once you've got something to try to validate it. And that's why it's so heavily emphasized, because you can do a lot with that. It's harder to figure out how to ask the right question.
Yeah.
It's harder to figure out
how to think about that question and ponder
and open it up, right? And that's much more the art side, right? And so, yeah. So I think that's that focus on inquiry,
which is what we're leaning into.
Right.
That's really the heart of what we're doing.
Yeah, I think so.
Which it's a perfect segue to what are we doing here? Who do we perceive as our target audience? Who do we think our audience is?
I don't know. Who are you? Who are you? I'm not even looking at a camera. Who are you?
Are you?
You who does not exist yet.
Who?
I mean, that's an interesting question. Does our audience exist yet? Do you see what I'm getting at?
Yes. They don't.
But they do.
They do, because when they watch this,
they will have existed at this moment.
They exist now unless we have a baby. Well,
Right.
That's not necessarily true. This lives on for X number of years. A baby that's not born now could come into maturity and then stumble upon this.
Sure. But even if we take that away, right? Even if we say that's that we're looking at an audience 5 years from now, and yeah, maybe there's some 5-year-olds at that point.
Well, then we're just asking, do other people exist? Which is the original question you were asking. Do I exist in front of you?
I think it's not like when I say, does our audience exist? Can we say an audience exists when it only exists in potential, even though there will be real people in that audience when it comes about?
Yeah.
Or because even though those people exist, they do not at this moment exist as our audience. The audience does not yet exist.
Yeah, they don't know how much they like this yet.
See? Keep watching.
What do you think they're like? It. What do you think they're like?
What do I think they're like? I don't know. I just haven't thought about this because I'll be honest with you. The camera, the whole setup, it's a good kind of structure to me to have a conversation because it has this audience that just sort of gives there is a performative element to it, right? We're talking right now, there's a performative element to it.
Yes.
Because we're performing for cameras.
Well, I'm not.
Right. But you are, because the
cameras are here, but I'm just shooting the bull with you.
Yeah. I don't believe it.
Well, hopefully I want to entertain.
Right, yeah.
I want to be an entertainer. Well, I am an entertainer.
Well, and
this is an expression of that entertainment. I'm performing.
It's like all sorts of improvisational, real forms of, and I think the parallel I'm most familiar with is live action streams of role playing games.
D&D, yeah.
Where people are sitting around a table playing D&D.
That's performance.
And the cameras are on, and yeah, I mean like.
But it's performance whether the cameras are there or not.
To some extent.
You're performing for each other.
Right, but to some extent. I mean, I've been reading a number of articles from like DM advice columns that are just like, look, don't try to make your table at home look like the table on camera, because those are voice actors often comedians, professional performers who are staging a performance, no matter how much it looks this way, and it's about, creating a kind of experience for the audience. And that's very different than the experience you have around a table with your friends, partly because there's a much more interpersonal space. There's a lot more tolerance for just downtime and kind of futzing around.
Then the question is it as entertaining for normal people to have fun and play D&D as it would be for these like trained thespians and all this production?
It is fun. Basically, the argument here is it is fun if you let go of the fact that you have to have this like crazy high quality comedic improv session every time.
Yeah.
Right? That it's almost like, what people say about porn, right? The problem with porn is people watch porn and think that's what sex is supposed to be like.
Right.
And that's sex that is done on camera for the camera.
Right.
Which is different
than sex.
Right. And so yeah, there's a level at which I like that because it structures in a different way. What is a cool, like the kinds of conversation, like we sit around a fire, we have cool conversations about ideas like this, and they're very different, right? Even though there's a level at which I do think when we've been talking, we've captured some of that, like Philip and Grant sitting by the fire talking about things, right? But there's a cohesiveness to it that's nicer in some ways because it's not like we're talking for 10 minutes and then someone walks up and interrupts the conversation and takes it a different way.
Right.
Or, or one of us just isn't as focused or, like all those kinds of things. The cameras, the potential audience brings that.
Right.
But I haven't thought about that audience as more than that, than this anonymous audience.
Well, right now we're thinking about it. What do you think about it? Who are these people that are going to watch this show?
I don't know.
Are they college level? Are they college students and above?
I don't know.
Are they kiddos?
I don't know.
You been cussing? Have we been cussing?
I don't know. I don't know if I've been cussing.
I could beep out cuss words.
Yeah, you can always beep out cuss words.
But they'll know what's under that beep.
Yeah, that's fine. Cuss words are,
yeah, it's fine.
I've never been with my kid. I've never been like, don't cuss. I've been like,
I haven't either.
Don't cuss in front of
people.
teachers.
Yeah, because they'll think poorly of my parenting.
Well, and it's not only that. I think what's important around that for me as a digression is getting our kids to understand that there are different contexts and different behaviors are different.
Yep. The library, you behave differently in the library than you do at the house, than you do at a friend's house, than you do at a pool, than you do,
And that's a normal part of life. And none of those is necessarily less authentic than the other.
Right.
It's just that we move in different spaces, we have different protocols, we have different ways in which we relate to each other interpersonally. So
our target audience, it's unknown, and we're not really able to figure that out.
I don't know. I mean, I guess like people who are interested, people aren't going to, I don't know, maybe people who watch the rest of your Phil's Fails would be like, I'm interested in this Phil Fails. So that's one, is whoever you attract to the broader.
Whatever this like fly light, this like mosquito light attracts.
Right. So have you thought about the audience for the broader Phil Fails endeavor yet?
I don't know. People that are into self-help, people that are into personal development and want to improve.
Yeah, I think that it's a very abstract way of thinking about an audience, but I think, one level is an audience that is interested in thinking about themselves and the world.
Yep.
Right? In a deeper, richer way.
Yep.
And I think that's one way to think about the audience. I don't think it's necessarily like a college-age academic audience, right? Like college students.
They're not studying philosophy.
Right. If they are studying philosophy...
then this is their fun and play.
Yeah, this is not going to be help. This at best, this is like, it cannot be terrible.
They're not going to reference this for their thesis. Is that what you're saying?
Absolutely not.
Philip Jones is never going to get a footnote on a thesis. Come on.
Part of what I want to when I think about what do I want to perform in front of the camera is doing philosophy from the hip, right? Not saying, it's this person who argued this in this text, and then a week later I'm like, that was totally the wrong text and the wrong person.
Yeah.
It's going to be on a video someday, and someone's going to be like, don't study with that Dr. Potts. He doesn't know his stuff. Right, like, but that's actually how you do good thinking is
To be sloppy and messy
be
and to come
sloppy
up.
and
And in the
messy.
messiness,
Right.
there is some great ideas.
right, and then
Because there's freedom.
right, and that's an important way we do philosophy.
And there's lack of, it's okay to fail.
Right.
It's okay to say the wrong footnote. It's okay to,
Exactly.
because there's something good's going to come out of that.
Yeah, so I think it's partly maybe people who have experienced academic philosophy and want to think about it a different way.
Yeah.
Like and I guess, like, if I were being challenged with what I wanted people to get out of something like this as an audience is, why should you study? Why should you care about philosophy? Why should you read philosophy? Aside from getting that reading done for your philosophy class, right? Why should
Outside of academia,
Yeah,
how does this improve a human being's life?
yeah.
How does this support
improve understood largely, right?
discernment,
Right, yeah, like, and I think, yeah, exactly.
interacting with your community,
Exactly.
thinking about what to eat for breakfast?
Yeah. What in philosophy we often talk about is public philosophy, philosophy outside the classroom. Yeah, this is kind of a mode of that, but I'm hoping maybe there's an audience that's interested in that, interested in, what can I get from just watching these guys ramble and thinking about what they're talking about?
Yeah.
Right?
At what point does Phil go into a psychedelic experience because he's talked about philosophy for too long?
Right.
Probably whenever I said, "What does all of this mean?"
Right.
Okay. What does all of this mean? I'm just joking. What do we hope to get out of it? Like, what do you? And this is kind of like the beginning to a little bitty relational discussion about, like, how's this for the two of us as human beings? But what do you? I think what you hope to get out of it is what you just stated: the ability to be messy with ideas and to shoot from the hip.
Yeah, I mean,
Anything else?
getting to hang out with you and talk to you.
Yeah.
I like that. Getting to be part of your project. I like that. Like, you're doing this cool thing with cameras and stuff. You're my friend Philip. I'm like, oh, my friend's doing something cool. I want to be part of that. I don't want to miss out on that. So, like, yeah, I think a big part of what I get out of it is just, like, an hour and a half, 2 hours of time to sit and talk with you and enjoy how your brain works and play off that and think about how my brain works in relationship to your brain. And
Yeah.
So I'm here for the love, man.
Here for the LOVE. That's
Not in a creepy way.
Not in a creepy way. Agape, y'all. Is that the one?
I think so. Yeah. Yeah, I've been thinking a lot lately as there's been an increase in the use of love language at my work, the use of love language in our society. The importance to be careful with that, right? Because I'm realizing that can hit people the wrong way.
Sometimes I wonder if you say I love you to my kids too much. And I wonder, what am I really saying? Am I saying what am I really saying when I say I love you? Because
Right.
it's gotten so, I say it all the time.
Yeah. I don't think you can say I love you too much to your kids. I think you're safe there.
Okay.
Yeah. But I think if you are telling your neighbor you love them and you're not careful, right? It's not the right context and you're just like, I love you, right? It can come off the wrong way.
Well, you've really you've torn out the value of love.
Potentially, or you've just you're talking to someone when they hear love from a person they don't know, it sounds to them like, I want to get in your pants.
I want to get in your pants.
Right?
They don't know you just did a loving kindness meditation.
Right, you're just coming out of this I love everyone, I love you, let's have a hug, and they're like, hands off, creepy dude.
Yeah, dude. You're way too...
Yeah, so I've been
way
thinking
too lovey.
about that. It's a tragedy to some extent that love language has that danger.
Yeah.
But it has a real danger. Anyway, so it's things like this. That's what I want. I want those those moments of interesting things to think about and insights and stuff. But with you.
Yeah.
Now I'm definitely I'm here for you.
I feel honored. And this is interesting because a good segue into the interpersonal discussion is the origin stories of this.
Uh-huh.
I was experiencing a tough time. This is my recollection of this. And you might have a different one. I was experiencing a tough time in my life with family, with co-parent, and I reached out to you and Nicole, and I said, guys, I'm having a hard time. And Nicole said, like, what's going on for you?
Right.
And I started to type what's going on for you, and then you said, I think this is something better discussed in person.
Right.
Let's meet.
Because I hate deep interpersonal conversations in text.
Because it probably did get too, I might have been getting too detailed or too explicit. Right. And the next thing you know, I'm meeting with Grant at the coffee shop down the street. And we're talking about it. And yeah, you were just available to, it's been a while.
I remember
since we used to go on bike rides together a long time ago. And I think 3 or 4 bike rides in, you're like, this hill's too much for me. I don't want to do this.
Yeah, I can't remember.
We were going up that hill, and you were like, let's go home.
Was that our last bike ride?
Probably. There was that one bike ride where I got down into the water and started swimming, and you're like, Alchemy would totally do this.
Oh, yeah. I was still like, because it was like deep COVID, and I would have done that.
This was pre-COVID.
No, we were in COVID for the bike ride.
Were we?
Yeah. Because I remember that, and it was because there were other people in the water.
Oh.
And I didn't want to get close to them and hang out. Yeah.
So, and it had been a long time since the bike rides. And yeah, we were at the coffee shop, and I was sharing my experience. And I think I came up with these questions of like, how do I know what's real? How do I know what's going on? How do I know if I'm a bad dad?
Right.
How do I know if I'm abusing my kids?
Right.
Like, I obviously don't think I am.
Right.
But I'm biased.
But how do you know that? And that's an important, like in all our lives, that's an important question to ask is like, how do I know that this image I have of myself, especially when it comes to how I relate to the things and the people that are most important to me?
Yeah.
How do I know I got that right?
And what I knew was I was raised in a really, what I would say, dysfunctional way. And dysfunctional is a kind word. Raised in a kind of abusive, traumatic way. And so the idea that some of that would come off as adult shrapnel,
it's totally
that would
reasonable.
Spin off in my overwhelmed states with my children is, I think, reasonable.
Yeah.
And it probably does in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah.
So that's kind of where it started.
Right.
And then as part of that coffee talk, I shared with you this idea I had about doing a show. How did we get to the first improv? Maybe I was like, you were one of the first people I interviewed, like probably in the first 5.
You were. I remember you saying you were going to do that. It sounded interesting to me, and I think you just asked if you could interview me.
Yeah.
And I was like, sure.
And the next thing you know, I've got an idea about Phails at philosophy.
And then we're talking, and then you're asking me these deeply personal questions about my family I wasn't expecting. And
we learned a lot about Grant Potts.
Like my mom's gonna watch this someday. I gotta be. You know.
Did you pull punches because your parents are still alive?
No. No, not at all.
Okay. Y'all go back and watch the Grant Potts first interview where we do a deep dive into Penn State. And
University of Pennsylvania.
I'm sorry, yeah, University of Pennsylvania.
They're so angry at you over there.
My bad, University of Pennsylvania. You also learn how he was born in Taiwan or
Not at all.
No, an African country, where they were growing rubber. This is like a
rubber plantation.
Plantation. This is a memory game. He was working on the electricity for that bad boy.
I mean, he was doing a big renovation project, but yeah, he built a dam for.
Oh, don't tell me it's Nigeria. No. Tell me. Anyway, go back to the video.
Liberia,
and learn a lot about Grant. But yeah, we got there to the first interview, and then I think somewhere in between that, I was really excited.
You're like, I want to read philosophy. How do I do that?
Yeah. And then you came over with the books, and we picked one. And I think you're a friend of mine. I've enjoyed going to your house. I enjoy Nicole. I enjoy Alchemy. I enjoyed y'all's little group. I think that y'all are kind of in the same way as far as the way you interact and see the world, at least from my perspective. And so there was an idea of like having fun and play with you. And then also like, how do I capitalize on Grant's friendship to learn and grow? Not in a selfish way. Capitalize is a weird word to say.
It is a very real.
Let's take capitalize out and use another word. How do I take advantage of Grant?
Oh, now you're taking advantage of me.
How do I leverage Grant's?
Now you're getting into Scientology language.
Oh my God. How do I just spend time with Grant and learn by osmosis?
Right.
So that was
Anyway, yeah.
yeah. So then I had this whole idea of Phil fails at philosophy. I interviewed one other philosopher, and it wasn't the same dude. And I like Zach. I think he's a cool dude, but it was just different.
Right. Well, it's also different because we have a certain kind of rapport from now years.
I think it's pronounced rapport.
No, I'm going to say rapport.
Yeah, from years.
From years of mispronouncing. People also say pillow weird. So
How do you say pillow?
pillow?
Pillow.
Yeah. Does it sound weird to you?
No.
See, people are always like, pillow. And then
whatever.
they say their word. I'm like, I can't hear a difference between yours.
What about advertisement? Advertisement.
Yeah, that's just wrong.
Aluminium.
Aluminium, yeah. But we have that history, right? And that's longer. Do you remember where we met?
I don't, but let me guess. Well, alchemy is probably the unifier, Everly and alchemy, and so I'm guessing at a school function. Ooh, would it be at Richard and Jessamine's?
Close, but not quite.
Dude, I gotta guess. Was it at Juniper and Ione's play that they performed at that sculpture
Absolutely.
museum?
At the Elizabeth Nye Museum.
Elizabeth Nye Museum in Austin, Texas.
Jessamine had recruited alchemy to be part of that.
And also recruited my daughters to be a part of it. They were the wind, I think.
And alchemy definitely hit it off with your kid, and there was and you were kind of on and I think we talked a little bit.
Yeah.
Maybe we exchanged, I think we exchanged contact information so that when Alchemy and Everly wanted to get together, we could arrange that because we were young and we were still in that mode where we had to be the absolute taxi driver for our kids.
That might have been 2019.
Maybe earlier than that. But yeah, it was, I feel like it was a bit.
Could have been earlier than that. Yeah.
Before 2020. Because we had then quite a number of times where we hung out because we ran into each other at Richard and Jessamine's house when they were a couple doors down.
Yep.
Which was always a delight. And then we got together some of our own, our kids got together. Mm-hmm. So anyway, we have this years of kind of building that relationship. You're not going to have that with someone else.
No
matter
it
how
comes
awesome
in
they
cold.
are. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's just a lack of comfort on, what the dynamics are of how you can play with each other.
I feel a little intimidated though that in this subject matter because you're a professor of philosophy and I'm a dunce. I'm not a dunce, but
yeah, you absolutely are not. But yeah,
within the area of philosophy, I'm way undergunned.
Yeah, and I think that's part of what I find interesting about the dynamic. It's a similar kind of dynamic I have with my students, where on one hand I'm trying to take my expertise and help introduce them to that subject matter, but on another hand I'm trying to not do that in a way that makes them feel like I'm the expert in the room, because that's not going to be I've got a semester with them. Most of those students are not going to study philosophy formally ever again.
Yeah, that's
right?
it.
And so for that kind of mentor, mentee, expert kind of transmission model of education, which has some value, right? But that's really good for a kind of long-term process of developing high levels of expertise.
You're more a tour guide.
Right.
Here's the giraffes.
Here's a tour guide. And
think about why they have long necks.
Right. But you got to do it in a way that's not just the zoo, right? Here's all these cute things to see. Now go home and never worry about it again, right? But the tour guide that also says, here are the things that you need to know to find your way in the future again, right? It's more like you're the person introducing someone to the city for the first time. You want to give them a view of the city. You don't want them to feel completely overwhelmed and lost in that city, but you want them to understand that they could get lost and how to avoid getting lost best.
And how
that they can find their way better in the future.
How to think about wayfinding.
Right, exactly.
How would you, you got 35 is the north-south main road, and Mopac is another one, and 183. So if you hit one of those are our north-south. Right. And if you want to, our east-west ones are, you've got Cesar Chavez. Well, you got the river. Whenever you have a city with a river, it's a wonderful...
Yeah, it's got a good point of reference.
And then you kind of have 183, which is another kind of point of reference. And
as John Ailey says, the secret to being happy in Austin is to never get on I-35. Or John Ailey said.
Don't get on I-35.
Don't get on I-35. There's just no reason to. The only reason to do that is to go to Round Rock, and there's really no reason to go to Round Rock.
We love you.
We love you, Round Rock.
Round Rock.
Not trashing Round Rock. Great
It's
parks.
jokes. It's just jokes. I'll follow that joke with, you never go south of the river because those people are not humans.
Oh, you mean, man, it's funny. I recently was arranging a meeting with a colleague who lives south of the river, and we're always meeting up here, and I'm just like, let me come, let's meet down there. And
no, don't meet down there.
There's almost this
well, you definitely don't have to take a bath if you go down there.
So I have
just trash pandas that live down there.
I have this need to try to go meet people who live south of the river, because I used to live, when I moved here, I lived in South Austin.
Yeah. How far south?
McKinney Falls Parkway, that.
That's not South Austin. That's McKinney Falls over there by McKinney Falls, right?
Yeah.
That's kind of a different whole area.
But it's still,
it's still south of the river.
But the reality was that all my friends who lived north of the river wouldn't cross the river to come see me. And it was just so obvious and so clear that I now, as someone who lives north of the river and who I go south of the river infrequently enough that every time I go south of the river, I'm like, holy shit, this place has changed, right? Which is because north of the river has changed in plenty, but it's just that I'm in it. So,
disclaimer. We love you,
South Austin.
We love you, South Austin people. We know you're not trash pandas. We will shower before we come and visit you. And also Round Rock. We see you up there. We acknowledge your presence. We know that you're beautiful people.
Should we just go around and trash every part of Austin that isn't North Central Austin? We thank you, Round Rock. You are not Pflugerville.
Thank you for not being Georgetown.
Right.
Okay.
So all that to say is I like hanging out and talking with you.
I mean, I think that's the interpersonal part. From an interpersonal perspective, it's this seems to be a helpful vehicle for deepening this relationship and getting to know. Were you about to say something?
No, I was just I was thinking about our audience. Audience is also an audience that's interested in the voyeuristic act of watching people have interpersonal conversations with each other.
And deepening their relationship.
Right.
When I think of a real moment, all this is real moments, but when I think about where I was breaking character, if there is a breaking, the last one where I was I don't want to die. And I've talked to people about that. It was just a real in the moment, outside of whatever this is.
Yeah, I remember that.
And feeling I don't want to die.
You still feeling that, by the way?
No. Well, I mean, so when I think about it.
It was an acute recognition of your mortality.
Yeah.
And the reality of that mortality.
Well, I just probably put that aside.
Yeah.
I think if we were to get down into it, I could be there again.
Yeah, no, I think that's, yeah.
Because it wasn't just, I like the idea of death meditations. I like the idea of considering the finality of all of this, the impermanence, that I've got one life to live. I need to make the best of it. And I think the idea in that discussion was, that's it. There's no afterlife. There's nothing else.
The universe disappears, at least for you.
For me. Yeah. Lights out. There's no seeing my daughters in the afterlife. There's no haunting them through their life and seeing them as a ghostly form. There's no Yeah, that's scary.
Yeah, and I think when you catch that fear, you're actually getting what those death meditation. Like you think, oh, the death meditations are to help you not be afraid of death. But I think that what they're really there is to confront you with the reality of death.
Reality of death. We're all going to die. And so make the best of this life.
Right.
And that gets us into the self-help aspect of
Right.
the show. This show is kind of one expression of me tiptoeing into that. If I go full on with this show, don't look for another software job, live poor for however long it takes me to get traction with this, it will be an expression of that. I'm just going to live this life full tilt. Because a friend of mine asked me, like, what would be the worst case scenario if you did the show? And I was like, well, no one will watch it. The world will realize that I'm ugly and stupid, and and I'll just live under a river or down in a van down by the river. Classic Chris Farley reference. And then I quickly transitioned to, well, the worst case scenario would be if I was 85 and I wondered, like, what if? What if I had tried that thing that I really wanted to do? And in my life, I've gone thing after thing of things I really was passionate about, I loved, and I didn't go full in because it was risky or it was scary. Or how would I make it work? I didn't know how I was going to make software work. I guess I'd just seen more role models towards that goal.
Right.
That made it seem more like it was a path more well trodden from my perspective. But maybe I was looking for software engineers that had trodden that path, and I can look for folks that have trodden this path.
Yeah. I mean, you're also living in a social framework that until maybe 6 months ago said the ticket to stability in life is being a software engineer. That's been a master narrative for 20 years.
Yeah.
In our culture.
Yeah.
And you may be getting out just in time, right?
Because AI, Chat GPT.
Well, and I'm just watching everyone I know in that industry, and there seems to be a complete reconfiguration of how labor is organized in that. In the same way materials engineers and certain types of engineers were 20 years ago. In the same way, all sort of like no industry is free of that.
Impermanence.
Right. Which is why I'm like, if I'm going to make an advertisement, there's why when you think about educating yourself, technical education is important, but character education is fundamental because that's what gives you the equipment to navigate these transitions.
The character education is what you apply to everything else.
Right.
Technical is one thing you could apply to it.
Exactly.
Because you're impacting the hardware that is exposed to whatever you're trying to do.
Yeah, exactly.
And character education. Where should they get that character education, Grant?
Huh?
Where should they get that character education? I was helping you with the advertisement.
And
it's pronounced advertisement.
Advertisement. So the ad. I mean, I think at its heart, that's what liberal arts education is when it's done well.
Yeah.
Right. That's what philosophy is. It's one aspect of character education because it's about looking at. I think when you use the word discernment, that's a key aspect of character.
Yeah.
Is that ability to make judgments, not to avoid judgment. To make judgments when it's appropriate to do so, and to make the right judgment when it's appropriate to do so. That's ultimately what you're trying to figure out how to do is stop, think it through, figure out how to make the right judgment, whether you're judging how hard to hit the nail or whether that person is going to be a threat to you and your family, right?
Yeah.
Anyway, so where did we get that? This has definitely been a tangenty moment.
Well, we're at the mercy of the winds here on this episode.
This is what happens when we throw out the book.
We threw out the book. Well, we were talking about interpersonal relationships. Right. And we were talking about
what brought us here to this moment.
Yeah. I don't remember what brought us to
What
that.
are you looking for out of this?
I want to get rich, okay? I want a big house. I want to move away from all you people. I'm just kidding. What I'd like to do is,
Okay. I'm not sure this is going to work out.
I mean, I
That's a
want to.
goal, like you might want to shift to investment banking.
I think part of it is contributing in a meaningful way to the world. I think I always wanted to be an entertainer. I think I always wanted to tell a story. I've always kind of had this outward extroversion.
Pause. It's an interesting thing when you say you want to be an entertainer, because I realize one of the things, and I think part of the synergy between us too, is when you talk about the audience and what you often do come back to entertainment. Is this going to be fun for them and whatnot?
Yeah.
Whereas I'm an educator, so I am always thinking, are they going to learn from this? What are they going to learn from this?
And if we bind
Right.
those two, they'll learn more.
Right. And it's not like they're mutually, because I think you're thinking, oh yeah, learning is a great way to have fun.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, yeah, you learn better when you're having fun, right? You
Yeah.
know, like, so yeah. Anyway, sorry to interrupt, but
No. I want to have fun. I want to share what I've learned in 46 years that it might help people. I do want to enrich my family. I do want to be able to support my daughters and role model for them that you can find a way. You can, you can plot a course. You can fail forward, fail fast, fail, furiously, and you can improve. And there's courage. It's a part of the process. There's a part that I'm teaching myself this, much like when I was a kid. I had a certain experience, and then as an adult raising kids, I was met with my own child. And I had to reparent myself in order to parent them well. And so I'm re-educating myself. What does failure mean? Is it okay to be imperfect? What does it mean to go from nothing to some kind of expression that's worthwhile? And is that expression worthwhile on the first step? And I would say yes, it is. But in our culture, I guess the only thing that makes the first step expression worthwhile is that you have the last step, meaning that folks don't go and look at rando artists' first sketches, but they look at Pablo Picasso's first sketches. They look at Matisse's first sketches. So those are important because they show a trajectory of failure, success, iterative improvement.
To some, no, I mean, yeah, but I think, I don't know. I just went to, and if you have a chance, there is this great show. I think it's maybe only got a few more weeks or a month left.
What is it?
At the Ransom Center, called Public Works. And it's an exhibit of Elizabeth Old's work. Elizabeth Olds she's one of the pioneers of printmaking in the United States.
Ooh.
And she's it's focusing on her as an artist who very much became an artist through the WPA, through the Depression era.
What does WPA stand for?
It's the work. I can't remember what the acronym. It's Depression era, alphabet soup, federal programs. It's the federal program that basically said we're going to help stimulate the economy by sponsoring artists to produce works of art, right? But it was very much around producing works of art for the public. So they did focus on sort of things like printmaking, where you could make thousands of prints so people could have those hanging in their houses instead of one work of art for a really rich guy, right?
Like it.
And, a lot of her work is documenting the Depression, like she's got this really beautiful set of prints that are on the meat packing factories in Chicago, just showing the work. And there's a progress through her whole career because she does that. And then she, as she moves out of the WPA era into the 40s, she does her own kind of more independent exploration of print, moving into new medias, exploring color. And she ultimately ends up being a children's author. who's interested in using image and this accurate visual presentation of the world, of like what happens when a fire crew comes out and puts out a fire, to write children's books to help educate children and help them encounter the world. It's a great exhibit. Go see it.
I will see it.
It's free. It's at the Ransom Center. You should go in and say, hey, I want to take a look at that exhibit. It's over there.
I'll do that.
Have you been to the Ransom Center?
That sounds familiar to me. Where is the Ransom
It's the
Center?
archive on UT campus. So it's right on Guadalupe, but the entrance is on the other side, so 180 degrees. So the entrance faces into the campus.
I think I have been there, but it's been a while. You know, I've gone to all the different museums because when we have free museum weekend every year, I would pick 5 or 6 for me and the girls to go to, and I've gone to, I would say,
so they're
a lot of them.
They're an archive. They hold old books, but they have lots of works on paper. Like they have a good photography collection. They have a good print collection, and so their exhibits are great. I went to a talk Wednesday. It was this week. With the curator, Tracy, who I know, who did that exhibit, and then a curator from the Met, and a curator from the big, I can't remember what the museum is called in Boston.
Big Medium?
No, the big museum in Baltimore.
Okay.
And they had all done pieces on the New Deal artists, right, that came out of these programs. In different ways. Like the Met one is, I actually bought the book for the Met one because it's just like a survey of the visual culture of the 1930s and how this federal program to fund artists just transformed in some ways the way we look at the world, because there's this huge infusion of federal money going into a lot of artists who are experimenting with and you can see how it influences industrial design, things like early alarm clocks and stuff like that. So it's cool. But all of this is a long, as I'm often given to do, a long narrative to make a simple point. Part of what was interesting listening to those curators is how they were going back through, because as curators, you're sitting on these huge archives, these huge collections. Mm-hmm. A lot of if you go to a museum, even like the Blanton, a smaller museum, but definitely like, the Museum of Fine Arts in Houston, you always have to remember you're looking at like a sliver of their collection.
Right.
Museums are primarily archival entities. They're primarily collectors of art, right?
I didn't think, I didn't realize that.
Yeah, I mean, that's that.
So they showcase maybe 10% of what they have in their collection?
Less than that.
Really?
Far less than that. They often have much more, if you've got...
What's the value of holding art that you don't share with the world?
Part of it is their archives for art historians to be able to go there and use the works and go through the works and whatnot, and curators, and because they just, they bring them out and that's where the special exhibits come up. Like when you go to the Blanton right now, I haven't gone to it now, there's a really good, what looks like it'll be a good exhibit. The Blanton, for those of you who are not in Austin, is the museum at the University of Texas.
And it's really good.
Yeah, it's good. Like when I first moved here, it was a tiny museum, and it's just grown and grown and actually become more of a world-class museum. But they have an exhibit on Edo period art.
Edo period, is that
of Japan?
Japan.
Yeah. And so I'm excited about that. But when you have a special collection, like a special exhibit like that, part of how they're able to do that is curators from either who have a museum with a huge Edo collection is able to go through and pull it out, or others. So they're sitting on these huge archives of art. And so when they're putting together something like this, they were just talking about discovering these kind of forgotten artists who were amazing and influential at their time, right? And then digging into that. So we don't look at the early work of people unless they're like Matisse, but who gets to be the Picasso of your age? Not like in the production, but who we remember in our age, right? In 500 years, we may have an art community that doesn't remember Picasso as anything as this minor blip in 20th century art, if at best, and no one's looking at his art, or he may remain a great...
How he...
And people who, like, you think about Emily Dickinson as a poet, she wasn't really known during her time, or even soon after. She was rediscovered and has become a major American voice.
Yeah, so you walk your path, you express yourself without
Right.
really being impacted by the current culture and whether or not they validate it.
Right. So it's always good to create, I think. I think it's always good to be in that space. Now, yeah, you can do that better if you can figure out how to make it work for you financially.
Well, I mean, making it work for you financially might be the worst thing for you, though.
Potentially. And it's a weird...
But I'd rather do that.
Right,
I want to have the financial thing working,
Right.
even if it makes the art suffer.
Right.
Because I want the kids to have good food.
Right.
And on insurance.
And the nice thing about, even though in late capitalism it's the one way we navigate connecting with audience, is if you become a working creator, right, you now have an audience.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's what we were talking about. Who is the audience?
Yeah.
We don't know, right? Because you're not putting it out yet. Things will change once you have an audience, and I think you'll get the reward is financial, but the reward is having someone listen, having someone see you,
To be able to influence, to be influential.
right, and to be influenced, right? Because once you develop an audience, if you're a good creator, I think you're in dialogue with your audience because you're listening for what they're looking for.
Well, you create as a community,
Right.
that you serve.
Right.
'Cause then this is an act of service.
Right. And it may look like what you're thinking it's going to look like now, or it may not. Part of it's just staying in that space to say, who's this? Where's it going? And not overthinking it and
Yeah.
taking it down some one trail because it seemed like that's the way it needed to go. And
Some way of honoring yourself and your vision and being influenced and kind of in cahoots with the community and the folks
Right.
that are interested in what you're doing, because they're interested in what you're doing because of the inspiration that you had to start doing it, and yet to continue that, it's a conversation with them to
Right.
some extent.
I was reading an article this morning. I forget what it was called. It was like something basically playing off Beast, the something of Beast. And basically it was talking about this sort of like YouTube style of videos
Oh, Mr. Beast.
that Mr. Beast seems to have pioneered. That's
Yeah.
all like lots of action seats, quick cuts, constant going, etc.
Yeah.
And it's designed. There's a word for it, and it's basically designed around just maximizing engagement.
Yeah.
And that it's not doing it anymore. Like it's
They've exhausted the...
like the audience of YouTubers find it boring now because it's been done so much.
Yeah.
No one wants to watch a show with a bunch of million cuts and total action.
Yeah.
Right? There's a desire now for something different in that medium.
Yeah.
I don't know why I went on that tangent. I think it's just the sort of the dynamics of the audience shift.
Yeah. And there's a whole audience out there that doesn't probably resonate with that style.
No.
And they're still there looking at, our audience doesn't have to be everyone in the world.
Right.
It can be a small percentage of people and be nourishing and being supportive of the art form.
Yeah.
Right? If you get 1% of America or of English speaking countries, and this is before I translate all this into Spanish,
Right.
that's a huge market. That's a huge audience.
Yeah, 1% is incredible. You don't even need that to be successful.
Yeah, less than 1%. So, I don't know.
But I think, yeah. I think it's good. You're going back to your kind of original, like wanting to also show your kids that you can do something like this.
Yeah, I want to model something, and I want to be there for them.
Right, and being there as someone who can say, hey, I was in a bad situation with my work.
Yeah.
Like whatever was going on with my work, it was paying my bills.
What's consistency bad? Software for me was consistently bad other than the compensation.
Right.
Consistently. The teams that I was in, it just never felt like I was jiving with them.
Wherever this goes, right? If this goes into a major kind of like, you become this well-recognized pioneer of like late 20s YouTube culture or whatever. Yeah.
Pioneer Philip Jones. I like it.
If this is a thing you process through as you find whatever it is you get
Next. A lily pad.
right? That you realize, oh, like I'm actually getting into the production. I want to work in production, right?
Yeah.
Any number of things that could come out of something like this. All of that is a way that, I think it's a gift to your family to say, hey, when you're in a bad situation to pay the rent, there are paths out of that, and they're going to be hard, and you're going to have to do work, and you're going to have to take risk, and you're going to have courage.
Yep.
And you can do it. You can move out.
Yeah. Yeah, you can find a way if you're diligent, if you work hard, if you honestly go out and find folks to help support you, to learn from. There's a pathway for folks.
Right.
For me, it's not a solo pathway. It's not me alone. It's me with Grant Potts. It's me with all the people that I invite into these discussions.
Right, and keeping that community to the foreground, even like the community for your equipment.
Yeah.
Like you wouldn't be here if it weren't for Austin Public as this major community endeavor.
And Austin in general.
And a culture that has built it in a context that is hostile to that kind of public work, right? In terms of the larger, at least legal culture of Texas, actually actively tries to tamp down this kind of public work.
Yeah.
And this communal work, right? That's incredible.
Okay.
Cool.
Let's spend the next 30 minutes.
Well, I don't know if
How much you got?
I was supposed to leave at 3, so I know we started.
Oh, it's 3 right now.
Yeah, so
let's start to land this plane.
Okay. Then we can talk next time about that and throw the book out.
Oh my God. So we'll talk about that and throw the book out. Is there anything you want to say before we get a hug in? And
no, I mean yes.
Yes and no.
Thanks. This is awesome. I love this.
I love it too. Give me a hug. Oh yeah, bud. Yeah, man.
I think that was a mildly awkward hug.
You gave a mildly awkward hug?
I think it was just because I was like worried about this falling.
Yeah, mine
but it's
didn't
good.
fall.
Like I think we should model some awkward hugs. Like hugs can be good even when they're awkward.
Hugs can be good even when they're awkward.
I mean, things have to be good when they're awkward if I'm going to survive, because I feel like I'm just awkward all the time.
What I noticed when I do the edits of the hug is I noticed that my lower body is far away from their body and my upper body moves in like kind of like
that's just you being polite. You're just not bumping uglies with
I'm not going to bump my nether regions with folks. But I think it's probably more common to step in and like really get a good hug.
Yeah, if you're hugging like, someone you regularly do that with.
Right. All right. This has been Phil Phails at Philosophy, the 4th installment of Phil Phails at Philosophy, the 5th installment with Grant Potts. Let's wait.
The 5th of 300, by the way.
Yeah. 300 is our kind of first series.
Right.
And then
after we die and realize that it actually isn't the end.
There'll be the ghost.
That's when the big series happens.
The big series. The ghost.
Like, remember when you were scared of death? Yeah, I don't know what I was thinking.
Yeah, I'm like,
this is awesome.
Yeah, man, I've been just spooking the Blenheim for a while.
It's like now that I don't have to worry about this sort of like corporeal part of me and it's just pure spirit, it's great.
Yes.
Thanks, Phil Phails at Philosophy.
Wave at all the people. I think we're getting more relaxed. That's good. People are going to love that. And scene. Oh, and scene.
I don't know if we clap at the
end. Yeah, we don't clap at the end.